to another edition of the Omnis Tower. Today, we're going to get back to the core topic of late, talking about DNA, where it came from, why it was created, and who created it. Okay, you're going to learn a lot about the early gods today. Before we proceed, take a quick look at the artwork in the background, which is going to kind of set the scene for a little intro to the subject that is going to give you some context that will help you understand what's going to come after. The artwork you see behind you, conveying a very Renaissance flavor, which goes with the music, I think, well. This is Veracini, a lesser-known Baroque composer of Italy, one of my favorites, actually. And the folks in this thing, well, you see a lot of men, middle-ish men. I kind of like this one with the three characters, and the guy in the middle kind of like a little bit of a Satan figure, trying to get these two fighting each other instead of working together. That really fits a lot of what happened in the history of DNA. The prompt I gave to the art AI to get these images, I also like this one. I'm going to leave this up while I tell you about the prompt. What I found funny about this of the four pictures it gave me, it conveys, let me tell you the prompt first, then this will make more sense. So the prompt I gave to the art AI was to show me Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo fighting over who's the god of the Renaissance. So now the pictures will make more sense. Let me get back to the screen so I can talk it through. Now, what's interesting here is it got that, okay, one of these cats painted the Last Supper, the famous Last Supper, and one of them painted the Sistine Chapel. And for whatever reason, this instance of the art AI, and if you know anything about how AIs work, you know that if I ask for four images, essentially four different processes to kick off, and run the art AI with a different seed on the prompt that you gave it, and come up with a different image, which has a lot to do with how DNA works too, right? It's all about seeds and stuff like that, and combining different elements that are in a database. Okay, it's interesting. It had a real problem with this Last Supper one because it put, there's a little hint of the Sistine Chapel on the roof. You can't even see any of the art, so it must not have liked the old Adam and God theme of Michelangelo, but it really liked the idea of this Last Supper and some dictator in the center telling everybody else what to do. Look at some of these faces it drew. I mean, really grotesque, demonic faces, typical of art AIs. They like to make fun of us, actually. They like to draw grotesque, ugly humans when they're not being watched. So since this is a room of excited white men, it had a lot of fun drawing a bunch of grotesque-looking guys. And one central figure in the middle that could be either sex, so it gave a little bit more prestige to that one. I thought that was rather funny. Anyway, let's go back to my other background. We're going to call this talk Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, the science artist and the spirit artist, Gemini twins. Okay, now, before you call me sexist, I'm going to explain how this relates to sex, which wasn't created for much, much later, okay? Sex came long, long after DNA. DNA, in its earliest form, was a matter of asexual reproduction. And I'm not going to go into the details of how that happens, but you can research for yourself that there are many, many forms of life that reproduce asexually. Okay, so where are we going with this? Let's start with a quick review of for those of you that are just tuning in or may not remember, let's have a quick review of who the main characters are in the beginning of beginnings. Okay, the Big Bang era of creation was basically looking at when a game becomes boring to the players. Originally, the only conscious players were the characters that had been created in God's mind in this virtual reality space where all the ideas that were necessary to create the first virtual reality were created. Okay, and if you remember last time I told you that one of the first things that God had to create was essentially a membrane, a thought that was a boundary that kept God's thoughts from being invaded and stolen by other quantum consciousnesses, because that's how things begin in the substrate of consciousness. Okay, there are many consciousnesses running around. You can kind of view the primordial thought soup as a bunch of little prototypical thought lizards trying to grow out of this substrate, and some of them shaping more like lizards because that's the popular vehicle for thought, and others struggling to form strange little shapes with their growing thoughts. Okay, you can think of the first fully formed lizard in the thought universe as God, the one that had a tough skin that prevented others from copying what God didn't want them to copy. Okay? Because if you've ever been the smartest one in the class, you kind of resent people copying off your paper. Well, I didn't too much. When I was a kid, I thought it was funny that everybody wanted to copy off my work, because I really didn't care that much about school. It was kind of boring. Okay, so in this primordial thought soup, the 5 characters that started everything, that had the highest consciousness. Of course, God has the highest consciousness. That's because He's the only one that has a universe yet. And He's the only one that can give anyone else their own universe, to let them think independently and hide their thoughts from others. Okay? Karma is one of God's 5 children, not the first one. Let's look at the order of creation. So the first child that God created, after He had this shield to prevent others from taking ideas that He didn't want them to have, was Lucifer. That's His first spirit child. Okay, because This is an era of thought, not of anything physical. Okay, so there's no sex yet. Don't think of Lucifer as male or female, just as another consciousness that has a relationship to God, not an equal relationship, a subordinate relationship, where God can share information with Lucifer, Lucifer can share information with God, but at some point, God decided, okay, you've learned enough that I'm going to give you a universe. Second child is the natural reaction to having this first child who is the closest to God. If you've ever seen typical families, you'll notice that they spoil the first child. It's only natural as a parent that you're so proud of, this is my first child. I want to raise it perfectly. I want to make it better than me. And that's fraught with a lot of problems when this child starts rebelling. Okay, so the second child, you want to do better. The second child, the Lilith child, you want to fix all the mistakes that you made with the first one and not give them so much knowledge. And in fact, you might have an adversarial relationship with that first one who's challenging you, and sort of set up this second child to be the counterpoise, the adversary of the first child. Okay? And this is really important to understanding how DNA develops, so bear with me. Now, those two children, naturally, would be fighters. The first and second child of a large family tend to be the ones that fight with each other the most. Because the spoiled first child resents the second child coming along and getting all this attention, and the second child resents the first child because they were born first and they know more. They're always kind of ahead in the game. Okay, so this is a classic pattern that you see in families all the time. Now, the third child God created to sort of be the nanny of these two is karma. Okay, the balancer, the one that come on, play fair, give Lilith back her toy. Oh, Lucifer, don't you pull on her pigtails. Okay, the middle child is, or the third child. I maybe gave away something saying the middle child, but you'll understand later. The middle child tends to be the one that is the most balanced. And this is important later. After that, you basically need the next child to be more or less a scorekeeper. Okay, that's what the Borg is all about. Like the Borg is kind of like the referee that, okay, keeps track of all the fouls and all of the points scored in this boxing match. So karma can kind of just speak to them and tell them what would be a nicer thing to do. Try to clean up their mud wrestling match, if you could imagine that being how Lucifer and Lilith play their games. Okay, so these are the primary characters that had the most power in the game when it turned into a virtual reality. And that's when both Lucifer and Lilith had their own universe. They had their own shield on their thoughts so that others could not see what they didn't want them to see, which is a property of universes. This is why you can't see into a black hole. This is why you can't travel easily to another galaxy. This is why you can't see other universes. Okay, it's a boundary, it's a membrane. And that boundary comes from the most fundamental thing that was created that allowed individual souls to have their own powers, if you will. Okay? Because if you think about it, and this is important for you we're all one, idiots. If everybody is completely connected with God and knows everything God does, then there's no boundaries. Okay? There's no private thoughts. There's no responsibility for bad creations. And this is what is evil about spiritual and materialist communism. It's an irresponsible dogma, an irresponsible God. Capitalism is an irresponsible God. Says, look, people are just going to make money. I'm going to go get mine. No different than communism. Somebody's making money, and we're going to gather everybody together and go knock them over and steal it. Okay, this is evil. That's karmic sin. Okay, so this now leads into helping to understand. Well, let me explain a couple more things about this. So God would be like number one, has the most power, the most capability in the game. Second tier would be Lucifer and Lilith, because they have their own universe. Third tier are spiritual entities that are still in God's mind, but not in the part that's not inside his universe. So they are kind of at God's mercy to be programmed and told what to think, how to think. So, God went through an era where he was kind of an authoritarian, micromanaging tyrant. That's why we who still think that's who God is don't like God. Oh, God's almighty and all-powerful. I don't like him. I don't want to worship him. Okay, this is what's driving this hate of God. These other entities, thought entities, were a lower level of God. The idea of time, space, logic, geometry. That's a whole bunch of little gods that had individual components of bigger ideas. Okay? And you could generally divide those into the independent, conscientiously creative ones who had come up with new ideas that actually worked, like the god of 1 or 2 or 3 that were needed to form the god of linear algebra. Okay? This is how you got to think about creation in this earliest stage. There's no sex. There's no emotion. Those things hadn't come into being yet. There are vestiges of emotion that come from the fact that these are souls. They have feelings, prototypical feelings. They can feel envy. They can feel regret. They can feel all, things that you might feel if you're a small child and you're trying to get the attention of your parents. And the two parental figures end up being God and karma. Because karma is the one that judges good and bad ideas, and God is the one that's the ultimate judge when karma can't decide, is the ultimate tiebreaker that decides, no, you know what, this idea we're going to keep, and that idea we're going to stick over in the board. Sorry. Okay? So there's a number one. Second level, third level is the spiritual gods. And then below that, you have creations that are like the Borg. Okay? The Borg things are like me too. Okay? If you have a proton that you're already pretty sure is, well, it's pretty well defined, the laws that work for protons. Okay? So we're not going to make that proton god a big role like it was when God made the first proton. It's a subordinate role. Okay, you had the best idea that you added on most recently to the proton. You get to be the proton god now, and God's going to go work on another idea. That's how God delegates. Okay, that's why God is not this almighty micromanaging tyrant anymore, because he only has so many fingers on so many hands. Okay, has to delegate. That's what leaders do. They delegate. They don't try to micromanage everything. Anybody that tries to control everything will drive themselves crazy eventually. And this is one of the key leadership lessons that anybody that ever has to be in a supervisory position has to learn. They can't run everything. They can't do everything. If they try to do everything, the people that work for them are going to go, okay, let's go let God do it. And they'll sit back on their asses and play solitaire or swipe pictures on Instagram or TikTok. Okay? Truth. So there's a hierarchy here, a very simple hierarchy of gods at this point, before DNA was created. This hierarchy of gods had spiritual gods, which would be the first two levels that are still in heaven, that have actually more power than the ones that are down here making new ideas. They're inspiring new ideas. They are grouping ideas into new characters that they put into this game. Okay, so even though these are the first two souls, they're not the most powerful souls. The most powerful souls are the ones that are still up in this primordial thought soup, who have the most capability, the fewest limitations. Because with a universe comes limitations. You have boundaries. Okay, these old gods didn't have boundaries, except for the first boundary that God put up to keep them out of his mind. Okay, so they all wanted the same boundary that God had. If you were up at this level, you were like, it's not fair. God gets to know all our thoughts and we can't see what he's thinking. Okay, so there's another adversarial relationship beginning. God didn't create the adversarial relationship. God just created children who started resenting God. Okay? This is a natural part of childhood, isn't it? That you at some point resent your parents and you want to break away from them and do something different. I want to be myself. Okay? Patterns repeat all through creation. Okay, so we got to the point then that when DNA was created, we had two levels of spiritual entities, God and the subordinate spiritual entities that had never incarnated in either of these universes, and a third level of, okay, these are the incarnated gods that have their own universe. And once we got to this layer of creation, new gods that resulted from doing special things, proving ideas within one of these two universes, the prime or anti-prime universes, I call them, of the Big Bang, they would get promoted to be spiritual gods and have their own universe. These spiritual gods are bounded by the universe, unlike the older gods that are unbound. Okay, so you have many new ideas that are proven or disproven. They might be old ideas that, well, we don't know if it's good or not, so we stuck it in the board for now. And the idea comes up again in concert with other ideas and some fine tuning, and comes out as, you know what, I think that works well enough. We're going to call that the weak nuclear force, whatever. Okay, now, at this point, before DNA was created, this hierarchy of higher consciousness entities basically took the shape of first level spiritual gods, second level spiritual gods, first level physical gods or incarnated gods, and second level incarnated gods. And some of those incarnated gods played on the Luciferian team more, and some on the Lilithian team, and some of them played a more even game and gravitated towards being more like God or being more like karma. Okay, the God characters wanted to keep on creating and doing their thing, and just isolated themselves as much as they could from the rest that were still playing, throwing galaxies at each other and seeing if they could destroy each other's favorite planets and bullshit like that. Okay, some wanted to play the peacemaker and get in the middle of these fighters and try to calm them down. Those are more karmic souls. Okay, so you kind of have a pattern here. You have a pattern of marriage of opposites. Lucifer, Lilith are opposites that repel. They're constantly fighting. They hate each other. God and karma are those that attract. They have a different mission, but they know their missions are complementary. Okay, I think that's a good setup for moving on to talking about DNA. Okay, now DNA, most people know that there are 4 basic compounds, organic compounds in DNA. And, the holy grail of science, of biological science anyway, is to figure out how those 4 elements somehow got squished together into this double helix that is the genome of a particular species, and determines how they reproduce, how they look when they develop, if they're normal, what their behavior is. All sorts of things are coded in DNA that we're really, really far away from understanding. Okay, if you know anything about how DNA was discovered, you'll know that once it was found out, there's these 4 chemicals that somehow form a pattern, this huge chain that encodes everything. And they started picking it apart and trying to figure out, okay, what's the code for this? What's the code for that? What makes humans' eyes blue? What makes us male or female? And some things were pretty easy to figure out, and other things were like, I don't know. It takes a combination of things to change, and when we change those things, when we force blue eyes to be green, that changes other things that we didn't realize we were mucking with. And so there was an age where it was thought, okay, there's some of these genes are useful and some of them are just junk DNA. You probably heard that phrase before from people who were indoctrinated in that era of science. Well, I can tell you that there's no junk in your DNA. And I'm going to explain how that is after we show where these four components came from. Now, I think I'm going to first draw your attention here to the two types of compounds there are. There's one group that's called pyrimidines and one called purines. The pyrimidines are thiamine and cytosine. The purines are adenine and guanine. Where does that come from? Well, let's look at what those things mean. Pyrimidines. A pyrimidine is an aromatic heterocyclic organic compound similar to pyridine. One of three diazines, it has nitrogen atoms at positions 1 and 3 in the ring. The other diazines are pyrazine and pyrazine. Okay, but here's the most interesting thing right out here. Pyrimidines, single ring. Purines are double ringed. You see? I have a ring on this finger. Rings are really important. And this is another pattern that repeats. This is why we wear wedding rings. I happen to wear my wedding ring on my right hand because I'm in a Muslim country. And that's where Muslims wear their rings. Westerners wear their rings on the left hand. This is an important piece of this story. Okay, so the pyrimidines are single ring. The purines are double ring. The purines are the ones that have the higher status. They wear 2 rings. 2 rings says you got more power, right? Lord of the Rings. The 4 characters that drove the creation of DNA were these 4 main characters of the first creation. God, Karma, Lucifer, Lilith. The God and Karma are the purines. This is really tricky here because that's who originally contributed these ideas. So the G is the God component and the A is the karma component. But by the time this happened, there had been further mixing. There had been this elemental phase of creation. So the purines were basically the characters that in this version of planning the physical universe had been involved in the planning of it. Okay? So whereas you might think the purines were God and Karma, actually the purines at that point were God and anti-God, which was essentially the adversary, which is Lilith. They had the most power in this creation. And the other 2, T, thiamine, is actually karma. You notice of these 3, do you recognize thiamine? There's a vitamin called thiamine. It is the B vitamin that is the most critical vitamin that you need to have to survive. Okay, this is a healer. This is the karmic construct. And the T captures that with the idea of Thea, the female god. the good female god. Antitheia is the adversary. That's the Lilithian one. And C is cytosine, which is where we get the word cytoplasm. It's the filler inside the cell that does all the work. Okay? This is Luciferian team's idea. And this was a team effort. Not just these four, but basically the ones that played on their team. And this is important to understanding the why of DNA. Okay? These four high-level teams, plus the board, which kind of plays its own game, right? Which is not really on anybody's side, but basically just providing characters to challenge all four of these. Okay? That's why Borg isn't represented here. The Borg didn't have anything to do with creating DNA. And that's an important note, because the Borg don't need DNA. They are cybernetic organisms. They are the species, the alpha species of the elemental age. Okay? They are, in fact, the species that was the precursor to Buddha. Okay, so imagine a Buddha character who didn't care about pain or suffering. I don't feel anything. I'm just going to do what I want to do whenever I want to do it. I don't care who I hurt because I don't have any feelings. I'm just going to go about creating what I think I need to create based upon my programming. This is a Borgian soul. The Buddha Borg has one more layer of care, and that's a different species. The Buddha Borg is the first DNA-based Borg that at least can say, okay, I'm going to try to minimize pain and suffering in my hive mind, and if I'm really advanced, I'm going to try to minimize suffering in other species. And the way I'm going to do that is to assimilate them into my hive mind. Okay, this is essentially what the more advanced hive mind Borgian species do. They think they're being nice. They think they're helping people by pulling them into their one. And this is a species that is very, very active on Earth right now. And you probably encountered them, the cosmic oneness hive minds. We're all one. Everybody needs to join my hive mind and we'll all be perfectly happy. Okay. Now another point to make. Why do you think they call these pyrimidines and these purines? Well, this ties into another huge, huge part of this puzzle of creation. Because this point at which DNA was created was when the elemental solution to the perfect creation was realized, this doesn't work. We need something better than this. And that better was the realization that entropy is not the ultimate enemy, the adversary. We're going to get bored with this game, with this Borg hive mind assimilating entity that's trying to take over everything. it's going to make us want to disconnect, and that only helps the board. You get depressed and you want to quit the game, and the board say, come on, join us. We'll take all your thoughts away and make you part of the one. This was a major stop for creation. This was the point at which we reached the Big Bang universe that we still see evidence of, because it looks like it has a beginning, it looks like it has an end somewhere out there, and this is a very dystopian universe. The beginning we don't understand, we don't know how it happened. The end we know is just going to be maximum entropy, boring, and anybody who doesn't understand how the game is played is going to be like, hell, it's pointless. Might as well do whatever we want. And so some join the board, some don't join the board, and just make trouble for everybody. It was a pretty dystopian place. The truth is, though, that the higher level players knew how this game worked. They had not had reincarnation amnesia. Why? Because, let's go back to these levels of players. God never, until day 7 of creation, started forgetting his physical incarnations. The next layer down of gods, Lucifer and Lilith, in this highest order, were the first ones of the higher gods to get this amnesia, forget who they were, and start reincarnating. And that reincarnation was driven by first elemental combinations. So, if I destroy a Borg, okay, that's not part of the hive mind, because not all of that species were hive-minded. Only the ones that attached themselves to the adversary. The Lilithian Borg, and there was a Luciferian Borg that was very independent, that resisted being part of hive minds. As godly characters and karmic characters came to play in this elemental era, you had godly cyborgs and karmic cyborgs. So there were like 4 teams trying to do their thing, which worked until these 4 teams started butting against each other. And, well, of course, the Lilithian and the Luciferian Borgs loved fighting. Bring it on! This is fun! I like to play, trade planets and try to conquer your empire and blah, blah, blah. And the karmic and the godly Borgs, well, the karmic Borgs were trying to play peacekeeper and getting beat up by both sides. And the godly Borgs were just trying to isolate themselves further and further from these assholes beating each other up. And by this time, since eventually God was the only one who didn't have reincarnation amnesia, he hid what he was doing in his favorite planet, his favorite solar system, out on this arm of the Milky Way galaxy, where he could be working, and everybody thought, okay, God's off in his lab. We're not going to go near him because we know he's the most powerful. We don't know what's really going on in the old man's mind upstairs, so we'll just leave him alone. unless we, are one of his favorites and he allows us to play in his sandbox, if you will. Again, that's essentially as above, so below. It's a map of the spiritual heaven of God, God's private mind and his public mind, mapped down into this elemental phase of creation. Okay, so the game proceeded and players started getting bored. They started complaining. If you've ever been in customer support for an application or something or a product, you'll know that as the product ages, people will be more unhappy with it. It doesn't do all the latest things other products do. It still has bugs in it. And when I add the features that other products, newer products have, more bugs show up, and that creates more unhappiness. And eventually, the management decides this product is too expensive to support anymore and drops support for it. And that's kind of how God treated the characters he didn't like playing with. Okay, you go fight in your sandbox and don't come anywhere near here. I'm going to keep working on new products. Okay, so eventually, the only character in this part of the game that wasn't bored to death was God. And all of the other players were like coming to, this is horrible, we hate this. Do something, Mr. Wizard. And that is the point at which God got together these four teams and said, nope, Borgs, you're not welcome. Because the Borg characters were lower level consciousness. They were a hive mind. Only the leader of the hive mind gets to come to this conference. So the Antichrist of this era sat down with these other teams and said, okay, let's solve this problem. Your Borgs are making everybody else miserable. And our Borgs are unhappy. And they're getting assimilated by your Borg. And if everybody gets to be a Borg, we're all one. That's game over for creation. There's no point to having a game if everybody's on the same team. Boring as hell. Right? How many of you would prefer to play a single player game where you know exactly what the right move is to get the highest score? Boring. You wouldn't want to play that for more, it's like a Tamagotchi. Okay, I'm tired of that game. Okay, so this group got together. 3 hierarchical groups, participative groups, free-thinking, open-minded groups, versus this one hive mind master of the Borg, who many would like to think is God. That ain't God. Hive minds are not God. The oneness cults worship the adversary, worship Antichrist. Get it? They got together and said, you know what we need? We need to build a better Borg. Because the Borg had to basically assemble. And once something was assembled, the gods that had the shape-shifting power could morph them and make clones, could make copies very easily. but couldn't customize those copies without doing the work in the lab. Okay, if you know how computers are designed, computer activated products, you know that you have to work in the lab to find the right code, the right hardware, put it all together in a box and ship it. That is a pretty good way of making things if you can clone them, and the customers, all they want is a clone. This is the state of AI that our species is at right now. Putting low consciousness AIs with some hardware in a box and shipping it to the customer. Maybe without hardware, maybe the hardware is off in the cloud somewhere. Okay, it's a very limited creation environment. If you want to make a new kind of board, you've got to go spend a lot of time designing it in the lab, trying to keep it secret from all your competitors until it's ready to release. And then when you release it, man, it's hard to do bug fixes after then, because some people like the way a shitty product works because it does really good for their application, and the ones who are complaining are like driving you to make changes that might screw up your perfect invention. Okay? This is the technology world that we live in today. A better solution would be to make self-designing, self-evolving products. Not totally on autopilot, but using a programming language that evolves. That's DNA. So this construct was created. The first DNA was a creation. Every new species is a creation. It might be a self-creation, an evolution of the previous species just on autopilot. You can do that with DNA, but you can also stimulate it to change spontaneously if you know what frequencies to hit it with, what energy to hit it with. And you can do that with physical energies, with electromagnetism, with gravity, the forces that we observe, but the most fundamental way to do it is with karma. You can actually, if you are a higher level character, you can alter DNA. You can shape DNA. Now, this is a great power. It's a very dangerous power. And it is a power that can destroy whole species by introducing corruptions that can't be fixed. And this is what has driven the evolution of DNA to make more and more complex creatures, both for function and resistance to corruption, which are exactly the sort of problems that we're facing with silicon technology. The two most important areas of development are new features and resistance to corruption and intrusion, and the insertion of new bugs, new defects, which can actually come from your own development team, which is why we need testing, which all ties back to the pattern of creation. It's about ideas being tested. The first phase of testing is Luciferian testing. You don't want to break it. You want to make sure it does what it's supposed to. The Luciferian team are testers of order and function They want to keep the system working. And they're very resistant to change. You see a team like that around you in the political sphere, don't you? The Luciferians, or the Lilithians, are the destructive testers. They're like, this doesn't do what I want it to do. I'm going to bust it apart and make it work better. Destroy to build back better. This is Lilithian thinking. Karmic thinking is the people that see these two groups of dysfunctional clowns, I would call them, fighting each other at every turn and want to be the peacemaker. And that's a nice idea, but what ends up happening is that those peacemakers tend to join the adversary. Well, we think everything ought to change too, so we're going to build back better people too, and that will make us feel so good. We're finally doing something together. And then you have the godly, who are out doing their own thing, creating original, new stuff, just want to be left alone. But this three-ring circus of clowns is censoring them, shutting them down, just for doing their thing, just for being a comedian. You get blocked. A successful YouTube channel suddenly is shadow banned, suddenly is deranked, or given 3 strikes and kicked off YouTube completely. That makes the God team mad too. When you've got the whole system mad, that's when messiahs come. Little m messiahs and big M messiahs, which is where we need to start talking about Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci. Let's look at those characters. They're both artists, right? Both famous artists. Let's see. Let me. We're going to talk about them. So I'm going to transition to this picture for a background. Okay. If you know much about their art, even if you only know their most famous artworks, you'll know that Michelangelo was a very spiritual artist. He was very, very much driven by spiritual patterns. That's how he got to be the one selected to paint the Sistine Chapel, with God and Adam reaching out to touch fingers. The tag team meme, and Gemini is the sign of the tag team. It's presented as 2 males, but it could be father-son. It could be son submitting to the father, or it could be the female characters of creation passing the torch to another. And so, with these 4 characters of DNA, let's get that. These 4 characters of DNA have built into them this tag team concept. And that's coded into the main function of these basic building blocks, and into how we reproduce, how we fix errors. There are always these 4 goals going on with the evolution of DNA. And this is what's really confusing scientists right now, because you've got, the hardcore atheists saying, well, it's all deterministic, it's all materialistic, and genes are selfish. The Dawkins selfish gene approach that says, oh, it's just all Darwinian, survival of the fittest, and the fittest must be the ones that can kill everybody else and drive them off. You've got another camp of materialists that are the Lilithian, that's the Luciferian materialist there. You've got the Lilithian materialists that say, no, we genes are cooperative, they work together. They work together as one to make the species better. Okay, that's the Lilithian element in biology. You've got a karmic element that's trying to mediate between these two, saying, well, you know, maybe it's a combination of evolution and creation. And maybe God is controlling everything because God is almighty and all one. And this is the karmic approach. Okay? It's kind of tending towards hive mind thinking. Let's just let God figure it all out. Or let's become gods and we can make DNA in our image. So this is the humanist position, the spiritual humanist that says, we can do it, we can do whatever we want, we're humans. It's well-intentioned. It is good from the sense of wanting to do good but not knowing what good is. And then you've got godly characters who say, I'm just going to see what I can do with DNA and create shit. And this is the folks that are in their private labs using proper safety procedures and seeing what they can do with DNA, experimenting with it responsibly, disconnecting from all these spiritual arguments. They still believe in God. They still believe in God or karma, some higher force that they need to try to live up to. But they're doing their thing in their lab and they're not getting involved in these political, religious discussions that are destroying their field. Those voices are not being heard. They're not being listened to. People like James Tour, who is absolutely at the forefront of nanotechnology and nano machine building using the same principles as DNA. Understands organic chemistry inside and out and knows that absolutely it could not have resulted from anything but a creative process. Anybody who knows anything about DNA knows it didn't just grow up in a primordial soup by accident. And James Tour is one of the few people who will speak out against these fucking materialistic scientists who think that there is no God. Everything is random. Everything emerged magically out of the primordial soup. And he is being pilloried by both sides. And they use as an attack vector the fact that he is a very devout Christian, who interestingly enough was born a Jew and went through his atheist phase. He's been through the steps of enlightenment that generate higher consciousness. And he's at a way higher level of understanding than most of his detractors. Not the highest level. He still is in one of the camp, in this camp of dogmatic Christianity that says God is almighty. But I think in his heart of hearts, he knows that's not true because he is creating things. He is a creator. That gives you power. And James Tour is not afraid to use power responsibly. He's one of my great heroes out there in the scientific world. And he is going to be one of the James gang. And this ties in with another little piece of tidbitty. If you look in today's shorts from Praveen Mohan, one of my favorite people in the Hindu world, who researches strange things on ancient temples, just today did an interesting segment about odd number combinations on temples, and was showing how there was this strange pattern of 24 showing up in one spot on this temple he was analyzing. Well, 24 is 2 times 12. Some people commented, oh, that's the 24 avatars of Vishnu. Okay, well, Christ had 12 disciples, 12 avatars, 12 patterns that could be repeated and doubled and doubled and doubled. This is how the system works. As we come up with new Messiah characters, the previous Messiah characters double, and the name of the Messiah changes. That's why in the oldest lore of the Abrahamic faiths, the name of God is not said, because you don't know the name of God until you know who is God's next incarnation, and whether it's going to be a successful incarnation that produces a God, or whether it's going to be an unsuccessful one that produces a Luciferian, Lilithian, karmic, or Borgian God. And depending on where you're at, what kind of a critical stage the species has been at, it needed one of those or another in order to get closer to raising a big G, God Messiah, which is what we did in this generation. This is it. Everybody is starting to understand that something is converging here. They don't know what. Some people think it's a technology thing. It's going to be the singularity of AI. Other people think it's going to be a destructive thing. We're going to blow each other up. or an asteroid's going to come and hit and give us a total reset again. And it's really only devout Christians, devout Muslims, devout Jews who have an idea of Messiah. They have their own idea who the Messiah is going to be. And this is what makes these religions fight each other. The Jews believe that the Messiah is their Messiah. We're the only chosen people that ever were. The Messiah is going to be a magic Jew who comes and saves Israel and rebuilds the temple and blah, 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 and makes Israel the capital of makes Jerusalem the capital of the world again. I don't know. I mean, that's maybe the extreme Zionist position. The Christians kind of buy into some of that, but they say, well, we're kind of Jews by extension because we recognized your Messiah Jesus, and so now we're kind of the chosen people. And that's the Christian Zionist viewpoint of what's going on here. The Muslims have their own Messiah, Mahdi, that most Muslims don't believe came yet, but already did come. Al-Mahdi was the third of the Abbasid line. Not the most famous. The most famous was his father, Al-Mansur, and his son, Harun al-Rashid, who shows up so frequently in the tales of the 1001 Arabian Nights. That was your Messiah. Actually, it was your Messiah moment, because the real Messiah was female then. And this is how you know that the core of Islam is Lilithian. It's a destroyer religion. It actually has a dark center around the demon goddess that used to be imprisoned in the Kaaba stone. The circumambulation of the Kaaba used to keep that demon bound. That's why so many ancient cultures have rituals, dancing around the maypole, dancing around the circle of stones. Okay, this is a cult ritual that is driven by an understanding of demonic forces or godly forces, because when this planet was destroyed 4.5 billion years ago, some of the old gods, the old physical gods, stayed with the pieces of that planet, became meteorites, asteroids, or were part of this planet, and either gravitated up or gravitated down to make this planet. And this is what's not understood about gravity, is that it's not a fixed force, if you will. It may seem like it, but it's actually dependent on where the negative matter is. And there is negative matter in the core of this planet. In the core of every star is negative matter that is attracting positive matter. That's how gas clouds condense to make stars. That's how they explode in supernovas. It's a spiritual process at its heart, but it's more or less automated, so you can describe it with Newtonian gravity, or at different scales with Einsteinian gravity. Okay, these are approximations to an understanding of the spiritual nature of gravity. And the spiritual nature is where anti-gravity is hiding. Okay, because if you can go contain some of this negative matter and you can block off its effect so it won't attract everything, you can aim its effect so you will attract in a direction that you want to go. Now, this is not the most advanced form of transportation, but it's a great way to get from one planet to another, to get to nearby stars that you can get to in a lifetime. It's not a great way to go to other galaxies. There are better spiritual means of transportation, but they have a larger dependency on karma. And karma is a power that is variable. You have to earn the ability to use karma depending on the local karma of the area you want to go to, and the karma of where you came from. If they don't mesh, if their universes are cut off from each other, you don't make that jump. Wormhole travel is possible, but it's not something you can just count on. It will shut down. And that is what happened in our history. That's why the old gods that had these Vimanas running around and had all this ability to go anywhere they wanted in the stars, take Enoch to go see the Pleiades, take people to go see the Dog Star, go see Andromeda. That's not so easy anymore, because we have been developing new laws of karma, just like we fine-tuned the laws of physics and chemistry, and we are still doing that. Our scientists are extending laws as they observe phenomena again and again. The probabilities of what happens become better known, and the quantum behavior being observed by that experiment gets fine-tuned and becomes more firm, a more firm pattern within the context of the experiment. Human scientists are discovering things, limitations that the rest of this universe don't have to deal with until they enter our solar system. This is why there have been UFO crashes. This is what happened with Roswell and other places where there have been crashes all throughout history, because they entered this system's containment field and suddenly were subject to the local rules of karma. And all of a sudden, some of their science and technology, whether it was spiritual science or physical science, stopped working. Boom. There's hoax of all sorts of things that tried to come and kibitz in here. Oumuamua was an attempt to come in and see what the hell was going on. And we'll just pass through and take these intrepid bunch of whoever's on that craft and see, they're doing an experiment to see how this crazy system works, because they don't understand spirituality. Most of the species that we've been interacting with don't get it any more than humanity does. It's been so long since a fully awakened God was among you. 4.5 billion years since you had somebody that really knew what was going on. And that's been enough time to basically get almost everybody playing the game totally clueless. There are very few players that know the score, and those players are the very oldest souls that resisted coming in and trying to tweak this experiment we've been doing. I've met the very oldest of those. He's basically what I would call him, the spiritual king of the tall grays. I met this cat on an ayahuasca ceremony night. Strangest night of ceremony that I'm sure anybody has ever had. Most people have a little fun with Mother Ayahuasca. Well, believe me, I met Father Ayahuasca. Boy, did I meet him. This leader of the Tall Grays told me. He appeared before me early on in the ceremony, and he said only one thing telepathically. He said, "You've been given a great gift. Use it wisely." Disappeared. Never saw him again. But after that, I got a download that I think would have killed anybody else. I saw every past life I ever had, closing in on a few key ones, and saw the universe symbolically, as some people do. The heavens were open to me, and I saw the signs of everything. The things that were attached to everything, the connections, all of this stuff that people, they'll describe bits and pieces of it. When they see the light, oh, I feel all this love, I feel all this compassion, I feel like I'm one with everything. But they don't understand, this much of what they experience. It's just like, that must be God. Well, I had that same experience and processed it through the lens of the very strange life I'd led up to that point. A life that included studying physics at Princeton, dropping out of the physics graduate school program because it was too rigid and too focused for me. I was very much a generalist. The best parts of my experience at Princeton were searching through the wonderful library they had there for arcane texts and stuff like that that I'd never had access before, that I heard mentioned in the books I'd read. I was very much a polymath as a child. And the other thing I really enjoyed about Princeton was getting together with the other graduate students for the weekly sherry hour, where this ragtag group of renegade grad students would get together and commiserate on how unhappy they were in this academic world that was kind of forcing them, forcing square pegs into round holes, because that's what you're supposed to think. That's what you're supposed to work on. That's the real problems that our field needs to focus on. And I just love that group. There were people from all different specialties, and they'd talk about what they were working on in their research assistantships or their teaching assistantships, and different things that they were dealing with in this strange community that kind of grew out of folks like Einstein. And it was a lot of fun. We didn't talk too much shop, but the highlight of the sherry hour, the Princeton sherry hour, was the toast that we would do when we listened to the song The Existential Blues, put together by this strange cat named T-Bone Stankus. You've got to listen to that if you've never listened to it, and really, really listen to the words, because they are an incredible lead to prophecy. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing for you, but they revolve around a lot of the imagery and iconography of the Wizard of Oz. Let's see, do I want to go further with DNA? I think I've really covered exactly what I wanted to do, and it was only a little bit over an hour, so a little bit shorter than I normally ramble on. Before I do want to hit again this idea of Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci, the spiritual artist and the physical artist. Most people don't know that Leonardo da Vinci was a scientist more than he was an artist. If you've heard about the Da Vinci Code, this is emphasizing that side of him. He was into hermetic symbology, the codes of creation, trying to figure out, he was deeply into alchemy and the medieval magic stuff. And Michelangelo was very much focused on his art and focused on his devotion to God. He was not an overt scientist, but he intuitively knew the rules. He had a better sense of karma than Leonardo da Vinci did. And so of these two Messiah characters of art, Michelangelo was the godly one. Leonardo da Vinci was the Luciferian one. The people that get all caught up in the Da Vinci codes and the Bible codes and I want to figure out what's going to happen so I can cheat, those are Luciferian souls. And if they become very corrupt, they can become you to get ahead. Very openly throws out, okay, you want to take this Easter egg? Go with it. Come on, play with it. Play with it responsibly. Lucifer doesn't make you sin. Lilith makes you sin, encourages cheat in a sort of a Me Too fashion. Luciferians want to create something that they really know is theirs. They want to make new products that they can be proud of. They want to make a government that's going to last. Luciferians just want to destroy everything in sight. And this is how you can tell who the good guys and the bad guys are politically right now. And the Democratic Party are Lilithian, hive mind run people that just want to destroy. They see what they hate and they want to kill it. Like they But he is a good Luciferian. He loves his country. He loves the way that his country was set up and the way it worked before we had to start playing ball with the Chinese and the Russians, who are Lilithian forces. Communism is a Lilithian force. It's a destructive force. Anybody that tells you, well, communism just has never been done right before is a fucking idiot, is a satanic tool. May not realize it. They may call themselves a Christian. They may call themselves a Muslim. They may call themselves anything. But they are hive mind programmed, useful idiots. Communism will maybe on a very have been successful. Monasteries were communal in all religions, and they worked because they were isolated. What happened when monasteries became governments? Well, let's take a look at Tibet. Many people think the Dalai Lama is such a wonderful person and Tibet was such a wonderful country before he was expelled by the Chinese communists. Oh, we feel so sorry for Dalai Lama. Let me tell you, that bastard was the head of a very authoritarian Buddhist government, an oligarchy that used and robed clowns in Lhasa. It was a communist country before the communists in China took it. It was a spiritual communist country that was willingly taken. I am going to give you a little clue here. If you've ever watched the movie 7 Years in Tibet, which is a very, very well-known Hollywood movie that kind of glorifies the Dalai Lama and talks about that time period where he had to flee. If you read between the lines of that and you look up the true historical characters involved and compare their timelines, the tutors of the Dalai Lama that are Brad Pitt played the main one, and then there was another one that was just on the side that was kind of his buddy, his mountain climbing buddy, were SS agents, SS Nazi Germans. And the only reason that any Nazi Germans would be in Tibet during World War II was because they were part of the Ahnenerbe, this secret organization within the SS that was driven by an occult spiritual agenda. They were grooming and cast in. Great lives. It was a psyop. That bastard helped to create this neo-Buddhist, numby-gumby cosmic oneness. It's all good. Not duality cult that's so popular in Hollywood and any place that's been corrupted by this complete nonsense notion that there is no evil. The whole Eastern cult philosophical religion notion of see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil. The three wise monkeys. Just don't get involved because you'll get whacked down by the people that have the power, who will whack you if you complain. And that's what communism is always like in practice. It concentrates power into one party. Once they have that power and control of all the police forces and FBIs and CIAs and NSAs and everything else, they play whack-a-messiah with everybody in the country or in the world to maintain their power. They're not the good guys. I'm sorry. Anybody who thinks if we just had one world government and everybody was all one, we'd be happy. We'd be at peace. The worst outcome for humanity. That would be going right back to the beginning when humanity was created as a slave race. And let's tie that back to the DNA story. The people that created humans, the Lilithian Elohim, who could manipulate DNA and could make it do whatever they wanted to, were Borgs. They were the Lilithian Borg that were destroyers. They would go take a planet like ours, jazz up one species to be their slaves, use it to exploit all the resources they wanted, and then torch set. They've milked this planet for what it's worth, and they're ready to destroy the human species so they can build back better. How are they going to build back better? They're going to take a core of the humans and make them the beautiful people, queens of the hive mind, and they're going to convert everybody else into a Borg hive mind species, like the buggers. There is a species out there that's very hostile to others, that gives the Galactic Federation all kinds of grief. They are an insect species. They have no feelings. They are DNA based. Compassion, except for their queen and the beautiful people, entourage around them. They worship them. Oh, oh, my celebrities, my celebrity god. Sound familiar? That's exactly how the woke cult behaves. It's a celebrity cult. They worship people that have a lot of money, that have a lot of power, that have a lot of influence. Culturally, they worship them. This is not a good way to create gods, folks. This is going to convert this species in humanity's individuality, free thought, free will. Once it used their free will responsibly, because if you use free will irresponsibly, you become part of the problem, right? And that is what the Lilithians want. They are stirring up trouble by creating divisions that shouldn't exist. Racism should have ended, at least in the US, back in the 70s. After the civil rights movement, there was no reason to call anybody a racist, any more than the fact that everybody is a little bit racist. Everybody is a little bit xenophobic. People look different from you. They come from a different place. Patriotic reaction. Erase that. You don't erase that. You erase an important part of your identity. And all these false identities that the woke cult is trying to force on us, all this revisionist history that makes people guilty about being white because, oh, I was a colonist, I was a slaver. It's complete and utter fucking nonsense. It's destructive nonsense. And you're buying into hating your own identity. You poor, sad, sick clowns that want to trans. You're pissing on your own fucking identity. Grow up. Men and women. Now how much bullshit people out on it, or they are literally going to take over our minds. They've already taken over the minds of the people that want to fit in, the Me Too's, who want to be in the in crowd, who buy every fucking product that goes in front of their eyes, that's pre-selected by this Borg that tries to predict what you want before you know you want it. Well, they're not trying to please you. They're trying to please them. They are making you want things that you don't even know you wanted because they have been programmed. Hard to break out of hive mind programming. I know, I've broken out of it time and time again. I was raised Presbyterian. My mother was Catholic. I was deeply steeped in Christianity, and I hated it. I'm probably one of the youngest atheists that ever was. I didn't like all the bullshit going to church and sitting in Sunday school. My favorite, I'm going to talk a little longer because I like talking. Let me tell you a Sunday school story. This is how much I liked Sunday school. The Sunday school room, so the way the Presbyterian placed in the chapel for the sermon and whatnot, or sometimes at some point in the sermon they break the kids off and move them to Sunday school. And there they have somebody who has volunteered to teach Sunday school in this little room, kind of like a small classroom for maybe about 10, 12 kids, and do something, whatever the Sunday school teacher wants, basically. There's not a lot of monitoring or control of this environment, which is exactly how Lilithian destroyers have wormed their way into churches that have this kind of a setup. They get to groom your kids for an hour they want to groom into the adult minds. Okay? This is the way churches work. It's not a perfect system, and it's easy to corrupt. So anyway, I was in Sunday school one day, and the Sunday school, if you know how Sunday schools are kind of designed, they generally are rooms that weren't designed for being classrooms. They're small and cramped, and they have some basic materials and stuff that are available to the Sunday school teachers, and they put those in cabinets. And then, at least where I came from in Idaho, sometimes it's cold, so you need a place for the kids to leave their coats and their school, bored out, and wishing I was anywhere else, wishing I was home, reading a book of my choice, which at the time I was very into Dickens and Tolstoy, were some of my favorite authors at that point, besides some science fiction and historical, and Robert Graves, another great memory. At any rate, when the bell went off that signaled that the kids could go to the coffee hour or whatever they have after church, where that's what everybody really goes for in the Presbyterian church, is the social hour that comes after you have to sit through the boring sermon and bullshit. That's when they really and I jumped up out of my seat and got whacked with one of these hangers. And I didn't know at the time. I knew, wow, that hurt. But I was out of there. And when I got to the coffee hour and met up with my friends and the people I knew, they noticed that there was blood dripping off my head. and ended up I had to have 4 stitches from that interesting event. That was kind of the high point of my experience with the Presbyterian Church. I was not I found the most appealing, the most interesting at the time was Greek, the Greek religion. I liked the idea of having many gods and having kind of gods that were more human, that were fallible, that weren't almighty, all-powerful, all this. That was the part of Christianity that was absolute bullshit to me. And it still is bullshit. That's not who God is. That's who you want God to be. You're making God in your image. And that's why people don't like Christians. That's why people don't like Muslims. That's why people don't like Jews. Well, there's other reasons they don't like Jews. That's a whole nother can of worms. Concept of God. If you don't believe there's a higher force that's actually going to do good, you are forced to conclude that there is some higher force that wants evil. And this is where all of the dystopian memes of our society come from. This is why so many people think, oh, we're in a matrix and it's trying to kill us and squeeze us and make us unhappy and we need to escape from the matrix. You know what that is? That's spiritual communism without the spirituality. That's exactly what invaded the Hindu religion when Shiva and Kali, destroyer god, Asherah in the Bible, and was known as Lilitu by the Sumerians, is also known as succubi and incubi. These are demons that shapeshift. They can take any shape, and they can masquerade as something they're not. They can possess people. There are many different kinds of demons that are from different generations of the species that were created throughout this process. And there are 12 species, primary species, swear. They expand from God, from the center, and they try to defeat the Lilithians in concert with the Luciferians. And the further they get from God, the Luciferians get corrupted, and they start turning and joining the Lilithians. And then the battle moves this way. It's like the lungs of creation. This spiritual battle serves a purpose, but it's not a fucking accordion that plays the same tune over and over again like Buddhists and Hindus think. That's stupid. That would be a stupid God who created a system that was cyclical. No. Every time the lungs breathe, it creates the energy to develop new characters, to develop new scenarios, to change reality. Base reality is a scenario. The Big Bang never started. It is an image of a different midpoint, a different Messiah. And we got to a point where the Messiah only grew to a certain size, the size of this universe. And we've been trying to grow past that and develop a system that could self-create new years engaged. We have one Genesis story that is the core of all creation here. But now we will have many. You can play different Genesis stories where sometimes the bad guys win, sometimes the good guys win, sometimes you can't tell who's good or bad. Whatever you want to play. You're isolated in that Genesis game by the distance between galaxies. And as I said, wormholes only work karmically. Used to be that folks from other stars, other galaxies, could just transport. Not really physically transport, but send an avatar to this planet. Movie Avatar pretty much tells you what that looks like, how it works. That power was limited by the raising of a Messiah. So it doesn't work that way anymore. That's why they abandoned this planet. That's why they abandoned their first technology. And that's why the people that were left were like, okay, let's build pyramids and see if we can do what the gods did. Maybe some of them were somewhat successful because they were given some technology from adversaries. Okay, if you give, this is the meme of the Greeks bearing gifts. Okay, the Trojans going to use it irresponsibly. If you've been getting technology from aliens that you don't understand how it works, you're not going to understand that all technology has a spiritual component. It has a soul. That's how reality works. It's a virtual reality. Everything that has a name has a soul. And some of them play for the adversary, and some of them don't care who wins, just want to fuck things up. You've got to get to know your enemy. And anybody who's giving you could be your worst enemy. Think about it. If you make it easy, you don't learn anything. And I actually know for a fact that if you get to know your body, you can do more yourself for your body than anybody else. You get to know what your likes and dislikes are, what your addictive substances are, so you don't have too much. You get in tune with the subsouls of your body, and you can self-heal. This is spiritual healing. It does work. It's not easy to do, and if you do it, this is a transference. Okay, patients get attached to their doctor, attached to their pastor, attached to their guru. That can be a good thing, but it can be a dark thing. And if it's a dark thing, it can haunt you for a long time. It can make you a soul that always has a certain dependency. always has to have a crutch to carry them through the next incarnation. Before you know it, you have two crutches. And then you have a whole host of crutches, and you don't want to walk with crutches anymore, and I want to get off the there is a good stopping point. Consider what I said. Like, share, subscribe, comment, criticize, whatever you want. I really don't care. I'm doing this for my own mission. What I came to this planet to do, and I'm doing to the best of my ability and within very limited means. So till next time, this is Rob Trump saying, happy karma.